I'm about to show you what I think are the 5 best running super shoes that have come out this year. They're light, they're flashy, and they're almost guaranteed to make you faster. So let's get into it. So we tested a lot of shoes before coming up with a top 5. And for a shoe to be featured on this list and be considered a super shoe, it needed to have 3 things: a carbon plate, supercritical foam, and some type of rock forward profile. So that disqualified pretty much any daily training shoes, like for example, your Asics Nimbus here. We made our own ranking for those shoes in another top 5, which you can check out after this video if you'd like. But for this video, it's racing shoes and racing shoes only. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with number 5, the Tracksmith Elliott Racer. Okay, so the Racer is definitely the most fashionable super shoe on this list, and maybe the world. It's got a nice muted profile, and then these like gold accents around the shoe, including the classic stripes, the Tracksmith stripes on either side. And then it even has this running poem carved inside of its drop-in midsole. I've rarely seen a super shoe this aesthetically pleasing. And honestly, I didn't really care about any of it. If anything, it made me skeptical of the shoe's performance. For me, the only thing that really matters in a super shoe is speed, and also I guess comfort. But I don't really care about what they looked like. And I think that made me be a little bit hard on the Racer when I first tried it on. And I was nervous that all these details were there to hide the fact that maybe the shoe didn't have many teeth. But I started really liking the way that it felt. It's got a strong rock forward profile, it keeps you on your midfoot and a little bit onto your toes, and the foam, the midsole, is made of PIBA, which is a very classic foam that brands use in super shoes. So even though this is technically Tracksmith's first super shoe, I kind of think they knocked it out of the park. They can still cut some weight, but this is a really good start, and I've been really enjoying it for workouts. I haven't worn it in a race yet, but I could, and I would trust it. So this shoe is good for the runner who wants to look good while running fast. And also maybe for the runner who likes to keep sustainability in mind. So a cool thing about this shoe is that the midsole is drop-in, meaning you can take it out, because after a while, these foams lose their bounce. What you can do with this one is you can take the midsole out and for $100 replace it, and so therefore keep the body of the shoe with a new midsole. So creates less waste. Meanwhile, I would advise you to avoid this shoe if you're looking to save money. For what it is, I think this shoe is overpriced. It's not as high performing as the shoes I'm going to mention a bit later, and yet it's more expensive than many of them, and so I'm not sure if it's the best bang for your buck. Overall, we gave the Elliott Racer a rating of 7.6, which is a little bit higher than the rating we had settled on when we did our individual standalone review of the shoe. We bumped value up a little bit because back then we weren't quite sure if the drop-in midsole would be replaceable. The fact that you can replace it actually increases its value in our eyes. Okay, on to number 4, the Nike Vaporfly 4. Okay, so big pro and big con with the Vaporfly 4. The pro is that it's super light. 5.9 ounces is competitive with anything out there. It's a funny move by Nike when you look at it first, because the Vaporfly 4 ends up being one of the very first super shoes that doesn't brush against the World Athletics limit for stack height, which is 40 millimeters. Instead of stacking this shoe with foam, Nike went another way and tried to make it kind of minimalistic for a super shoe anyway. And the result is a super light running shoe. But the con is that with that stack height lost, you lose a lot of power. The reason super shoes are so big is because all that foam has a purpose to propel you forward. And the way that Nike made the Vaporfly 4, it's almost like they sacrificed some power for lightness. So if you expect your shoe to be super bouncy and super propulsive, like say an Alphafly 3, you're not going to find it with the Vaporfly 4. That said, the Vaporfly 4 is great for a shorter race, like a 5K or a 10K, a race that doesn't require so much cushion underfoot. Also, I like it for courses that are windy. This shoe takes turns better than most super shoes because there's less to lug around, and there's no feeling of instability with this shoe because it's closer to the ground. Meanwhile, you might want to look elsewhere if you want your super shoe to be big, cushioned, and powerful. If you like Nike, go for the Alphafly. So we gave the Vaporfly 4 an overall rating of 7.9 in our standalone review. It got a lot of points on design, and here we're not talking aesthetic design like we were with the Elliott Racer from Tracksmith, but just in the actual construction of the shoe. I like how Nike created a smaller super shoe, because even though it lacks a little bit of power, it just feels so much more natural on the feet. And my personal theory is that that's where super shoes are going. We're not going to have big, bulky shoes in the future. They will be smaller and they'll have all that power. And the Vaporfly 4 doesn't quite have that power yet, but it's a step in the right direction. And so I applaud the design. I think it's a very cool complement to the Alphafly 3. Meanwhile, we dinged it a little bit on performance because at the end of the day, if you want something fast on your feet, you will go for a bigger shoe because there's a lot out there that has more muscle than the Vaporfly 4. Okay, let's move on to shoe number 3, the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2. So I've said this before a few times now on this channel. I think the Endorphin Elite 2 is the most underrated speed shoe of 2025. I am blown away by how powerful this shoe is. And I think it's underrated because I didn't expect Saucony to be the brand behind one of the most powerful shoes of the year. I hate to say it, but I found that Saucony had been sleeping at the wheel a little bit in the last few years when it comes to really top-end super shoes, especially considering they were one of the first brands out the gate with a super shoe way back in 2020. Now, the Endorphin Elite 2 makes up for that. So what happened here is that Saucony took its Incredi-Run foam, which is a TPEE foam, so just something that's very, very light and responsive, and then stacked 2 layers of it to make a very squishy but also very powerful midsole. There is a huge power difference between this shoe and the previous 2 that I've mentioned. And I think what throws people off about the Endorphin Elite 2 is that it's not on the feet of many pros. But that's not because the shoe isn't as good as what else is out there. It's because not many pros are sponsored by Saucony. This shoe is good for anything between a 5K and a marathon, though I would say it's probably best suited for longer races because it is very cushioned. The one drawback with it is that it's so squishy and bouncy that I find that I can be a little unstable on it. I'm also a pronator, meaning that my feet rotate inwards a little bit when I run, and there is absolutely no safeguard against pronating built inside of this shoe. So I do feel a little bit wobbly. If that's a concern, you might want to avoid it. And in our standalone review of the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2, we gave it a rating of 8, and that was bolstered by a very high performance rating. We were just blown away by its power and speed. This guy moves fast. Now, moving on to shoe number 2, the Adidas Adios Pro 4. I've always been a big fan of the Adidas Pro series. My first road races and super shoes I think were done in the Adios Pro 2s, and now the 4 is an iteration of that that's just lighter and sleeker. The midsole is made out of TPEE foam as well, just like Saucony, but this construction of the foam just feels a little bit denser and so not as wobbly. And my favorite feature of the Pro 4, which you can find in all of the Adidas Adios Pros, is that they don't have a carbon plate. They have carbon rods that are somewhat splayed out in the shape of your metatarsals. And that adds a bit of flexibility to the shoe, but also reduces weight because you don't have as much carbon in there. Now, I really struggled to rank the Endorphin Elite 2 under the Pro 4. They are almost equivalent in my mind. I was maybe a little emotional in making my rankings because I raced in this shoe twice and PR'd twice, so I know it's a very good shoe. Also love the Endorphin Elite. I think the one differentiator is that the Pro 4 does feel so much more stable, and so I could see more people enjoying this shoe. If anything, I would call the Pro 4 the Goldilocks of super shoes. It's not too big and tall, but it's not too small and slender and not powerful either. It's in a good middle and it has something really good to please everybody. So the Pro 4 is well suited for the 5K, the marathon, everything in between. And really nice bonus is that it's a durable shoe. The Pro Series is always durable. They will last you 300, 400, maybe even 500 kilometers before losing their bounce, which is really good for the wallet. So we gave the Pro 4 a rating of 8.4. This one too bolstered by performance. It's just a very fast shoe, design, and also value. So good shoe all around, you can't go wrong. If it wasn't for a crazy release that happened in April, this would have been my shoe number one. But let's move on. Now, before moving on to number one, I need to make a little disclaimer. If you're a shoe nerd and you're sitting at home, you're doing the math and you're realizing that something doesn't add up. There are 3 big players in the shoe game that have yet to be mentioned, and there's only one spot left. 2 of these players, the Adidas Adios Pro Evo 2 and then the Asics Metaspeed Ray, I did not include them. And the reason being, they're very, very hard to get their hands on. So these 2 shoes currently disqualified. They're not really yet available to the public. So we're overlooking them. Number 1, however, also hard to find, not as hard to find. If you've been paying attention, you've noticed that it's hiding in plain sight. I'm talking about the Puma Faststar Nitro Elite 3 that is on my shelf behind me here. So first of all, if you're very curious about this shoe, I encourage you to go look at our standalone review, because there we go into a lot more detail. But there are some super shoes that change the game because they come out with technology that has never been seen before. I wouldn't say that that's the case here with the Faststar Nitro Elite 3. This is more a case of this is a Frankenstein monster of a super shoe. A company doing many little things right to iterate on things that already exist. So this is what I mean. It has an upper that weighs next to nothing. It has a 7-layer carbon plate that actually extends beyond the shoe to give a little bit more lift at the toe off. And then it has ATPU foam, which we're starting to see more in the running world. It's the new gold standard of super foam, a little more light and responsive than your classic P-backs or even TPEE foam that we just previously mentioned. So it's super foam, it's a carbon plate, it's an upper, it's a rock forward profile. We've seen it all before, but not in this good of a combination. So the result is a shoe that feels like a track spike. That's good or bad, right? So a shoe that feels like a track spike is not all that cushioned. And so if you're really looking for something that feels good under your feet and that will save your legs for the next day, maybe look elsewhere. I also wouldn't call it all that durable. I've only worn it a handful of times and the tread at the bottom is already getting pretty smooth. So in that area or in those areas, it doesn't score that well. However, it is by far the fastest super shoe that I've worn. I ran my 10K PR in it and I fully intend on wearing it more. It has become my racing shoe of choice. And yeah, the hype is real. So naturally, the Faststar Nitro Elite 3 received our highest rating this year for a super shoe at 8.6. Design and performance is what brought this shoe up. So fastest shoe, best performance rating. And also design, I just think it's a very carefully crafted shoe. One thing I didn't mention is the lower. There's so many cutouts to this shoe to make it light. It just feels like it's on the next level of engineering when compared to any of the other shoes that I've mentioned. So if you don't mind paying a little bit of extra money, and if you can find this shoe, that's my recommendation right now. And there you have it. Those are our 5 favorite super shoes now on the market, released in 2025. I expect this list to change very quickly. There are a lot of releases that are planned in the summer. Some of the really key super shoes that are out only to the pros right now are likely going to trickle down to the public really soon. So we could make another one of these videos in 6 months and the options will probably all be different. It's a super fast changing landscape. If you're into this type of super shoe talk, I encourage you to check out a podcast that I recently recorded with my colleagues Michael Doyle and Caitlin Tossi on super shoes. So it's kind of a state of the union type thing. where are we at with super shoes, what constitutes a super shoe, which one we all think are the best ones. I rank them from 10 to 1 in that one, and we go into even more depth. So feel free to check that out on our channel. And if you're still here and you enjoyed the video, please feel free to share it with someone else who might think the same, because our goal is always to connect with runners just like you. And yeah, if you disagree with my choices, or if you agree, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what you have chosen to run in terms of super shoes. Thanks for watching. Happy running, and until next time.